The decision to fix the cabin wasn't born of inspiration. It was born of defeat. I'd inherited the place from a grandfather I barely knew, a ramshackle A-frame sinking into a pine-choked hillside, and for 2 years, I'd let it sink. It was a fitting monument to my own life, structurally unsound and slowly surrendering to the elements. The roof leaked, the porch sagged, and a persistent chill had woven itself into the very bones of the house, a chill I felt deep in my own marrow. My life in the city had imploded quietly, a slow leak rather than a bang, and I'd retreated here with the vague notion of starting over, only to find myself paralyzed. Doing nothing had become my primary occupation. But then a pipe burst in January, flooding the crawl space and turning the low hum of decay into an active roar of destruction. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I found a flyer for a handyman tacked to the corkboard at the town's only general store. Cole Evans. No job too big or too small. Fair prices, honest work. The handwriting was a strong, no-nonsense scrawl. I called the number, my voice tight and unused, and a low, calm voice on the other end said he could be there the next afternoon. He arrived in a dusty Ford Ranger that looked as though it had been assembled from the parts of 3 different trucks. When he stepped out, the first thing I noticed was the way he moved, with an unhurried economy that suggested a deep, physical confidence. He was taller than I'd expected, broad in the shoulders, with a day's worth of dark stubble on a jaw that looked like it could take a punch. He wore a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and dusted with fine, dark hair. "You must be Leo," he said. His voice was the same as on the phone, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the cold air. It wasn't a question. I nodded, suddenly aware of my own posture, how I was hunched against the wind, my hands shoved deep in the pockets of my thin jacket. "Cole." He gave a short, sharp nod. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of blue, swept over the cabin, taking in the peeling paint and the sad, crooked line of the porch roof. I braced myself for a wince, a shake of the head, the polite but firm refusal. Instead, a slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It wasn't a mocking smile. It was something else, something I couldn't quite read. It was a smile that seemed to enjoy a challenge. "Well," he said, his gaze finally landing on me and holding. "Looks like you've got your hands full." I felt a flush creep up my neck. "It's a project. All the best things are," he said, and the smile widened just a fraction, revealing a hint of teeth. "Let's see the damage." I led him inside, the smell of damp wood and mildew greeting us like an old, unwelcome friend. I started pointing out the obvious flaws, the water stain blooming on the ceiling, the floorboards that bowed under our weight, the window that wouldn't close. I was babbling, a nervous tour guide of my own failure. Cole didn't say much. He just listened, his head cocked slightly, his gaze sharp and analytical. He ran a callous thumb over a warped door frame, tapped a wall with his knuckles, listening to the sound. He was assessing the house, but I felt like he was assessing me, too. When I finally ran out of steam, trailing off in the middle of the kitchen, an awkward silence fell between us. The kitchen was the heart of the cabin's problems, with its flickering overhead light and a faucet that dripped a maddening, syncopated rhythm. Cole broke the silence. "First things first," he said, his voice startlingly loud in the quiet room. He walked past me to the ancient coffee maker on the counter, opened a cupboard as if he'd been doing it for years, and pulled out a tin of coffee. "You got filters?" I was so taken aback I could only point dumbly to a drawer. He was taking over. Just like that. Within minutes, the sputtering gurgle of the machine filled the kitchen, followed by the rich, dark scent of brewing coffee. It was the first warm, inviting smell the cabin had held in years. He found 2 mismatched mugs and filled them, pushing one across the counter to me. "It's a good frame," he said, leaning his hip against the counter and taking a sip. "Good bones. Just needs someone to pay attention to it." He looked at me over the rim of his mug, and his eyes were so direct, so unervingly perceptive, I had to look away. I felt like he wasn't just talking about the house anymore. That first day set the rhythm for the weeks that followed. Cole would arrive just after sunrise, his truck rumbling up the gravel drive, and I'd have the coffee ready. He was a whirlwind of focused energy. He started with the guts of the house, the plumbing, the wiring, the leaky roof. He worked with a quiet competence that was mesmerizing to watch. I'd offered to help, but my attempts were clumsy and inefficient. I mostly just got in the way. So I became an observer. I watched him from the doorway as he wrestled with copper pipes in the crawl space, the muscles in his back and shoulders straining against the fabric of his shirt. I watched him balance on the steep pitch of the roof, moving with the easy grace of a cat, a hammer swinging from a loop on his tool belt. I learned the specific sounds of his work, the rhythmic thump of a hammer, the high-pitched whine of a circular saw, the soft curse he'd mutter under his breath when a nail bit. My life, which had been a vast, empty expanse of silence, was now filled with him. His presence was a solid, grounding thing in the hollow spaces of my house and my head. I started to notice the small details. The way he'd chew on his lower lip when concentrating on a difficult measurement. The spray of sawdust that would catch in his dark hair. The scent that clung to him. A mix of cedar, sweat, and something else, a clean, sharp cologne that lingered in a room long after he'd left it. I was supposed to be writing. That was my excuse for being here, for hiding from the world. I was a novelist with one moderately successful book to my name and a crippling case of writer's block. I'd sit at my desk, the laptop open, and pretend to work. But my gaze would invariably drift to the window, searching for the flash of his red flannel shirt as he moved around the yard. My document remained blank. My head was full of coal. He had a habit of closing the distance between us in ways that felt both casual and intensely deliberate. He'd stand behind me to point something out on a blueprint, his chest brushing against my shoulder blades, his voice a low vibration near my ear. I'd feel the warmth of him, a radiating heat that made my skin prickle. My breath would catch in my throat. I would stand perfectly still, a statue, until he moved away. One afternoon, he was installing a new window frame in the living room. I was holding the level for him, my arms aching from the awkward angle. "A little to your left," he murmured, his focus entirely on the bubble. "Right there. Hold it steady." My hand slipped. The level clattered to the floor. "Sorry," I mumbled, my face hot with embarrassment. Cole didn't say anything. He just bent down, picked it up, and placed it back in my hands. But this time, his hand covered mine, his fingers wrapping around my own, guiding them into the correct position. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. The contact sent a jolt straight through me, a bolt of electricity that made my heart hammer against my ribs. He held it there for a second longer than necessary, his thumb stroking absently over my knuckles. "Got it?" he asked, his voice soft. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. He let go, and the absence of his touch was a sudden, shocking cold. He went back to his work as if nothing had happened, but I stood there for a full minute, the ghost of his handprint burning on my skin. I spent the rest of the day replaying that moment in my head, analyzing it, dissecting it. Was it an accident? A simple correction? Or was it something more? My mind, so adept at overthinking, went into overdrive. I was a detective searching for clues in a case only I seemed to know existed. Every glance, every casual touch, every shared silence was evidence to be cataloged and examined for hidden meaning. I was building a narrative, a story of unspoken desire, and I was terrified I was the only one reading it. The work moved from the structural to the cosmetic. The house was healing, and it felt like I was, too. The constant chill was gone, replaced by the hum of a new furnace. Sunlight streamed through clean, properly sealed windows. We moved on to painting the interior, starting with the living room. We chose a warm, creamy white that made the small space feel open and bright. The room was crowded with ladders, paint cans, and drop cloths. We worked in a comfortable, practiced silence, the only sounds the wet slide of rollers on the walls and the soft rock station Cole always played on his portable radio. The air was thick with the clean, chemical smell of fresh paint. We were working on opposite walls, but the room was small, and we were constantly navigating around each other. Our arms would brush. Our knees would knock. Each accidental point of contact was a small spark in the tense air. I was so acutely aware of him, of the space his body occupied, that it felt like the room was shrinking, pulling us closer together. At one point, I had to reach a high corner near the ceiling. I was stretching, balanced precariously on the top step of the ladder, when Cole's voice came from directly below me. "Careful there." I glanced down. He was standing at the base of the ladder, one hand resting on the side rail. His other hand was planted firmly on my hip, steadying me. It wasn't a fleeting touch this time. His hand was just there, a solid, warm weight against my body. My entire nervous system lit up. I could feel the distinct pressure of each of his fingers through the thin fabric of my jeans. "I've got you," he said, his voice a low assurance. I froze, paint-loaded roller held aloft. I could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. If I leaned back just a fraction of an inch, I would be resting against his chest. The thought was so potent, so overwhelming, that my hand trembled. He must have felt it. His thumb moved in a slow, deliberate circle on my hip bone. It was a gesture of comfort, maybe, but it felt like a caress. It felt like a question. "Leo?" he asked, his voice softer now. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I finished the corner in a clumsy rush and scrambled down the ladder, putting space between us. "Thanks," I said, my voice coming out as a choked whisper. I didn't dare look at him. I busied myself with stirring a can of paint that didn't need stirring, my heart doing a frantic, panicked drum solo in my chest. Later that week, a storm rolled in, a furious squall that lashed the windows with rain and knocked out the power. The world outside dissolved into a churning gray chaos. Inside, the cabin was plunged into a sudden, deep twilight. The radio died. The sound of our work was replaced by the roar of the wind and the drumming of rain on the new roof. It held. I felt a ridiculous surge of pride. "Well," Cole said, setting down his roller, "I guess that's it for today." But the road out was a steep, muddy track. There was no way his truck would make it up the hill in this downpour. He knew it, and I knew it. "You're stuck here," I said. It came out sounding more like an accusation than a statement of fact. He didn't seem bothered. He just shrugged, that easy smile playing on his lips. "Looks like it. Got any candles?" We spent the evening in the living room, the space illuminated by the flickering, dancing light of a half-dozen candles. The shadows they cast made the familiar room feel strange and intimate. We sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa, a bottle of whiskey I'd found in the back of a cupboard between us. For the first time, we just talked. Not about drywall or spackle or wiring. He asked me about my book, and for the first time in months, I found myself able to speak about it, the words coming easily. I told him about the plot, the characters, the knot of fear in my stomach that told me I'd never be able to finish it. He listened. He didn't offer platitudes or easy solutions. He just listened, his blue eyes intent in the candlelight, and when I was done, he simply said, "You'll finish it." He said it with such quiet certainty that I almost believed him. Then he started talking about himself. He told me about growing up in a town not much bigger than this one, about working for his father's construction company before striking out on his own. He talked about the freedom of being his own boss, the satisfaction of fixing things that were broken. There was a surprising softness in him, a vulnerability I hadn't expected. The confident, capable handyman was still there, but now I could see another layer, something quieter and more thoughtful. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" he asked, his voice low. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, not looking at me. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. It was too direct, too close to the bone. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice barely audible over the storm. The truth was, I was always lonely. The loneliness was a constant companion, a dull ache behind my ribs. He looked up then, and his gaze met mine across the flickering space. The teasing glint was gone from his eyes. In its place was a raw, unnerving sincerity. "Me too," he said quietly. And in that moment, the tension that had been humming beneath the surface of every interaction we'd ever had became something else. It wasn't just my own frantic, one-sided pining anymore. The look in his eyes told me, without a shadow of a doubt, that he felt it too. The air grew thick, charged with everything we weren't saying. The space between us felt both immense and infinitesimally small. I could feel the pull of him, a magnetic force drawing me in. I wanted to close the distance, to reach out, to do something. But fear held me in place, a cold, heavy hand on my chest. The storm passed in the night. The power came back on with a hum and a click, and the candles suddenly seemed garish and overly dramatic. The moment was broken. We cleaned up in a strained, awkward silence and said a stilted good night. Cole took the couch. I went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the sound of his breathing from the other room, the quiet rhythm a comforting and agonizing reminder of his presence. The next day was the tipping point. The sun was out, bright and sharp, and the world smelled clean and new. The tension from the night before was still there, a low hum beneath the surface of our morning coffee. We went back to painting, but the easy silence was gone. It was replaced by a taut, brittle quiet. I was hyper-aware of every move he made, every breath he took. I felt like a wire stretched to its breaking point. We were finishing the kitchen. I was on a small stepladder, cutting in the edges around the cabinets. Cole was behind me, rolling the main wall. I felt his presence like a physical weight. "You missed a spot," he said. His voice was close. Too close. I glanced down. He was standing right there, looking up at me. He pointed to a spot on my cheek. "Right here." I reached up, but my hand was clumsy. Did I get it? No, a smile touched his lips. "Here, let me." He stepped closer. The world seemed to slow down. He raised his hand, and his thumb brushed against my cheekbone. He wasn't wiping away paint. His touch was slow, impossibly gentle. He stroked the skin there, his gaze dropping from my eyes to my mouth. The air crackled. The smell of paint and his clean, sharp scent filled my lungs. My heart wasn't beating. It was slamming against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. This is it. The thought screamed in my mind. His eyes lifted back to mine. They were dark, serious, asking 1,000 questions I was too terrified to answer. I can't do this. I can't. The fear was a tidal wave, drowning out everything else. I jerked back as if I'd been burned. I have to. I started, not even knowing what I was going to say. I scrambled off the ladder, nearly tripping, and fled the room. I didn't stop until I was in my bedroom, the door shut behind me, my back pressed against the wood. I stood there, shaking, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I had run. He had reached for me, and I had run. The shame was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I stayed in my room for what felt like an eternity, listening. I heard the soft squelch of the paint roller stop. Silence. Then, the sound of his footsteps, slow and deliberate, walking out of the kitchen. I heard the front door open and close. I squeezed my eyes shut, my stomach twisting into a painful knot. He was leaving. Of course he was leaving. I had ruined it. I had confirmed his every fear and mine. I was the lonely man in the broken-down cabin, too scared to let anyone in. Minutes stretched into an hour. The silence in the house was absolute, heavier and more profound than it had ever been before. It was the silence of absence. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to see the empty space in the driveway where his truck should be. Taking a deep breath, I opened my bedroom door and walked out. The house was quiet. The living room was empty. The smell of paint hung in the air, a ghost of the morning's tension. I walked slowly toward the kitchen, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I was preparing myself for the finality of it, for the confirmation of my failure. I walked into the kitchen to talk, to apologize, to explain, to beg. I didn't know. He was there. He was leaning against the far counter, arms crossed over his chest, watching the doorway. He hadn't left. He had been waiting. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. I stopped in the middle of the room, my carefully rehearsed apologies dying on my lips. My throat was tight, my hands were clammy. Now it's all in the present. This moment. Right now. He pushes off the counter. He walks toward me, and there's no hesitation in his stride, no question. There is only purpose. My feet are rooted to the floor. I can't move. I can't breathe. He doesn't stop until he's standing directly in front of me, so close I can feel the heat radiating from his body. My back finds the counter. The formica is cool against the thin fabric of my shirt, a stark contrast to the fire licking up my spine. He doesn't touch me. Not yet. He just looks at me, his blue eyes searching my face, stripping away every defense, every lie I've ever told myself. Then he moves. He sets his hands on the counter on either side of my hips, caging me in. The space between us vanishes. It's just us. My heart picks up its frantic pace, a wild thing trapped in my chest. He leans in closer, and his scent, cedar and clean sweat, and something uniquely him, overwhelms me. He smiles. It's not the playful, teasing smile from before. It's not the sad, knowing smile from the storm. This one is different. It's slow. It's sure. It's devastating. Leo, he says, and my name on his lips is a physical touch. His voice is a low, rough velvet that makes every nerve in my body stand at attention. Stop running. It's not a request. It's a command. And it's the most freeing thing I've ever heard. The fear that has been my constant companion for years, the cold hand on my chest, finally loosens its grip. It doesn't vanish, but it recedes, pushed back by the sheer force of his presence, by the undeniable truth in his eyes. I don't know who moves first. Maybe he leans in. Maybe I surge up. It doesn't matter. His mouth finds mine, and it's not gentle. It's not hesitant. It's a collision. It's firm and sure and hungry. A release of all the tension, all the unspoken words, all the stolen glances that have built up between us for weeks. His lips are chapped from the wind, but soft, and he tastes of coffee and whiskey and want. My hands, which have been clenched into useless fists at my sides, come alive. They find his waist, gripping the thick fabric of his flannel shirt, pulling him closer until there is no space left between us at all. I can feel the solid, steady beat of his heart against my own frantic rhythm. One of his hands leaves the counter and tangles in the hair at the nape of my neck, his fingers pressing into my scalp, holding me to him. He angles his head, deepening the kiss, and a sound escapes my throat, a ragged, desperate noise of pure relief. This is real. This is not my imagination. This is not a one-sided story I've been writing in my head. He breaks the kiss, but only to rest his forehead against mine. Our breath mingles, hot and ragged. His eyes are closed. I keep mine open, memorizing the lines of his face, the dark sweep of his lashes against his skin. I thought you left? I whisper, the words raw and scraped from my throat. He opens his eyes. The blue is dark, intense. I almost did, he admits, his voice rough. I thought maybe I'd read it all wrong. You didn't. I say, the words tumbling out, urgent and necessary. You didn't read it wrong. I was just scared. I know, he says, and his thumb strokes my neck, a soothing, hypnotic gesture. We can be scared together. And then he kisses me again. This time, it's different. It's slow. It's a conversation. It's a promise. There's no desperation in it. Only a profound, soul-deep recognition. It's the feeling of coming home after a long, long time. It's not rushed. It feels honest. It feels right. When he finally pulls away, he keeps me close, his arm wrapping around my waist, holding me against him. The kitchen is quiet except for the sound of our breathing, finally falling into a shared rhythm. The morning light was soft and gray, filtering through the kitchen window. I woke up on the couch, a thick blanket tucked around me. For a disoriented second, I was alone, and a familiar, cold panic seized me. I sat up, my heart starting its familiar frantic beat. The house was silent. He was gone. It had been a dream, a fever dream born of loneliness and paint fumes. Then I smelled it. Coffee. I got up and walked into the kitchen. Cole was standing at the counter, his back to me, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. He was pouring 2 mugs of coffee. The scene was an almost perfect echo of our first meeting, but everything was different now. The air wasn't charged with tension. It was filled with a quiet, settled calm. He must have heard me, because he turned around. He wasn't smiling, not exactly. His expression was serious, a little guarded, as if he were testing the morning air, too. He held out a mug to me. "Morning," he said, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, taking the mug. Our fingers brushed, and this time, I didn't flinch. The warmth of the ceramic seeped into my cold hands. We stood in silence for a moment, just looking at each other. The awkwardness I had feared wasn't there. In its place was a kind of shy wonder. He started, clearing his throat. He ran a hand through his already messy hair. "I called and canceled my job for today. For this week, actually." My heart gave a hopeful little leap. "Oh." He finally met my eyes, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Figured we still had some work to do here." He gestured vaguely around the nearly finished kitchen. "And maybe," he hesitated, his gaze dropping to the mug in his hands. "Maybe not just on the house." The relief that washed over me was so profound it almost made my knees buckle. He wasn't running. He wasn't treating last night as a mistake. He was staying. He was choosing to stay. "I'd like that," I said, and my own voice sounded stronger, clearer than it had in years. "I'd like that very much." He looked up, and his smile widened. The teasing, confident glint was back in his eyes, but it was softer now, tempered with something new, something tender. Good, he said, because this porch isn't going to fix itself. Later, we sat on the top step of that same sagging porch, our mugs of coffee warming our hands, our shoulders pressed together. The morning was cool, but I didn't feel the chill. The sun was breaking over the tops of the pine trees, casting long, golden shafts of light across the yard. The world felt quiet and new and full of possibility. I had spent 2 years in this cabin feeling like a ghost, haunting the ruins of my own life. I had been so convinced that I was meant to be alone, that I was too broken to be fixed. But sitting here, with Cole's solid warmth beside me, watching the sunrise, I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel lonely. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was home. And I knew, with a quiet certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning. We had a lot of work to do, but for once, I wasn't afraid to start.